So let's see. We'll do first segment Max Holloway, second segment Shev and Jacek. We may not get a full 10 minutes out of that because I don't know if it was relatively one-sided. I mean, so was Holloway Ortega, but I feel like it had much more dramatic moments.
I need at least 15 minutes of gloating time here, Connor.
Well, we'll put in. I'll cut out all the gloating you've already done and add that to the end of the episode. Just gonna tack it on at the end.
Just do a bonus. You can just do a bonus episode.
It's just me, you gloating, and there's just every once in a while, barely audible, the sound of me sobbing like 10 feet from the mic. That would be good.
Thiago Santos, Jimmy Manuwa.
Holy fuck.
One of the best fights ever.
Are you excited for when Thiago Santos knocks out John Jones?
I am. You saw it. You saw
shit, you tweeted
right?
about that. That's where I stole that idea from. Yeah, that would be he could do it. He's such an insane beast and just does not know any other way of fighting. He's like Anthony Johnson with no fears.
Yeah.
I mean, so that we've seen so far. But I have never seen a fight in which someone has made him look like timid or anything. He usually just goes insane. And now he can take the shots. And John doesn't hit that hard. So, other than Jones...
Uriah Hall backed him up.
Yeah.
But yeah, since going up to light heavyweight, he's just like, wow. This is... I mean, like, because he must have been cutting a shitload.
Yeah. He seems to just feel great.
I'm going to just punch everything the fuck to death. and if that doesn't work, I'm going to punch some more.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Heavy Hands. We are back this week to talk about UFC 231 and all of the insane, memorable shit that happened on its main card. We're also going to be looking forward to next weekend's final UFC on Fox card. That is the last UFC card on Fox before they move over to that ESPN deal that with this week's, Greg Hardy things. I'm sure ESPN is not regretting it all, although let's be real, it probably won't have any kind of real impact. That one's main evented by Kevin Lee versus Al Iaquinta 2, a sort of baffling, it's sort of like when they make like, this is sort of the RoboCop 2 or the RoboCop 2016 of rematches, in that it doesn't feel like it's really relevant in the same way, and maybe the guys making it don't understand why it mattered the first time around, but we will get into that and some of those main card fights as well after we talk about all the big stuff that happened at UFC 231. I'm Connor Rebush, of course, your host, and with me as always is Phil McKenzie, and the main event of UFC 231 Max Holloway returned after some health scares and a long layoff and all of this shit that he had to go through, somehow being the underdog to Brian Ortega even, defended his belt against Brian Ortega with what may have been one of the best performances of his entire career, and it's been an incredible career already. I think he landed something in the range of 290 quote-unquote significant strikes over the course of this bout, which I believe those 290 actually also put him at the top of the all-time strikes landed list of UFC fighters. He's now up there about 1,627 or something like that, more than guys like Nate Diaz and Frankie Edgar. And it was also, more than either of those guys can claim, a really beautiful artistic use of insane pressure volume striking. It was...
I believe it was also the most strikes ever landed in a single UFC round by one fighter.
In that fourth round? Yeah, that does not surprise me. Which means, of course, we'll have to be discussing this too as we go forward. The most strikes anyone's ever absorbed in a single round. And we'll have to talk about the stoppage and what impact a fight like this could have on Brian Ortega going forward. How crazy is this sport, Phil, when you start the week being really concerned about one guy's health and then end the fight being concerned about exactly the other guy's health. We should all feel bad, really, for enjoying this. But what a fight. Like, it was incredible. Your thoughts on it before we kind of jump into the nitty-gritty.
I mean, on the spectrum, it normally definitely came closer to being a performance than a fight.
Yeah.
I think, especially on rewatch, how dominant this was becomes fairly apparent.
Mm-hmm.
Ortega, I think, really, to his credit, showed, much as he has in the past, he has, tremendous heart. I mean, he just showed that even more, and adaptability.
Mm-hmm.
In that third round, he really figured something out to turn the fight around, to not necessarily turn the fight around, but to just kind of change the momentum a bit. We could probably get into that a bit later, but in general, this was like just holy hell. Max Holloway is good at this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. I tend to agree. Yeah, while watching it the first time, there was a point in this fight. We may as well just discuss it. But there was a point in this fight where, I was getting nervous for Max watching it live. I was thinking. I mean, I was saying on Twitter as well. After about the first and second rounds, I think sometime around the end of the second round, and then going into the third, Ortega did start to land a few big shots and was throwing a lot of combinations. The adaptions you were talking about. Was countering in combinations and pressing forward mid-combo and consistently firing back, just wasn't letting Max get away with any kind of laziness, and was landing decently. And I was thinking maybe Max should back off and box a little bit, maybe he should do the kind of thing that former destroyer of souls Jose Aldo ended up doing as a champion, where he learned to be more defensive and more careful, because I thought, this is what happens. Ortega's going to get into this fight, and Max is going to end up in a serious brawl. And it was almost headed in that direction. Almost. But then Ortega exhausted himself going for the typical third round Brian Ortega shit. By the end of that very round, there's a point at which Joe Rogan, commentators were in some rare form for this card, by the way, but there's a moment at which Joe Rogan is Ortega's gaining a lot of confidence, and there's a minute left, and Ortega jumps in on a takedown, and you can just tell by the body language, by how much effort he's able to put into the takedown, and how much he's really trying to use the clinch just for rest, that he's exhausted from all the stuff that he had to do just to compete in a round that he still lost to Max Holloway. And then Max just obliterated him in the fourth. Man doesn't get tired, continually finds new ways and new angles. He is like Terrence Crawford of MMA. He's crazily creative and yet super fundamentally sound all the time.
Yep.
It's incredible to watch.
Yeah, I mean, right from the beginning, one of the things we mentioned is that Ortega was going to have to be adapting from behind against a tremendous adapter.
Yeah,
and that was something we saw right from the beginning. And all that lateral movement that we mentioned ended up being a major story of the fight. That Max's ability to take angles offensively and to turn his defense into offense is it's unparalleled in this sport. The ability to Ortega's defense has definitely improved over his. He still has a number of tells. He tends to kind of lean back and hide behind his shoulder and raise his other hand to cover his face. He's got a few built-in defensive responses.
He's got a thinly developed shoulder roll system kind of going on.
Yeah, and you can still see that he's still running on a lot of kind of instinct and guts and heart out there. He's still got a tendency to try and turn that shoulder roll into actually just turning away. Mm-hmm. And that actually, interestingly enough, that got him one of his biggest moments where he turned that into like a spinning back elbow. Mm-hmm. And it's always fascinating to me the way that no one ever gets purely better at combat sports or anything like that, right? You're always closing off opportunities as you improve. You're always learning not to take certain things as well that might actually be successful. So that was interesting. But in general, it was just the fact that Ortega would come off after Holloway, and he'd be chasing Holloway on what looked like a straight line, and Holloway would throw something back at him, and Ortega couldn't recognize, and who could, that Holloway is hop-stepping as he does it, and suddenly Ortega realizes that he's throwing at someone who isn't there as Holloway is charging down at him, throwing like 3 or 4 shots back at him from off to his side.
This might sound really reductive, but like this is the way it was initially explained to me, and so I like to explain angles to people like this. But look for like if you want to watch this fight back and be like, how did Max Holloway, other than just throwing way more punches, how did Max Holloway beat Brian Ortega? Because just throwing lots of punches, like you could be Leonard Garcia out there, you can suck at it. No disrespect, Leonard Garcia doesn't suck, but he's no Max Holloway. You can just throw volume for volume's sake and not put on a performance like this. The angles, like you raised that point initially. I think I just added to it, like credibility by saying like, oh, well, yeah, actually specifically, you look at the way Ortega loads up and slips and throws his counters. I can definitely see like someone outmaneuvering him the way they might have outmaneuvered, like the way Ali outmaneuvered Joe Frazier, by just getting him to root himself and then moving around him. But like, look for all the moments in this fight where Max Holloway appears to be just facing Brian Ortega, and Brian Ortega is not facing him. Like, angles at their core are really as simple as that. Look for all the times that he gets Ortega to throw something, or Ortega does throw and puts himself in a position where suddenly he's no longer quite facing Holloway. His weapons aren't like, he doesn't have Max in his sights for just a split second. Or look at the moments that he attacks, and yeah, Max blinds him with a jab and hop steps off to the side. Hop steps so smooth and so good, Phil. Conor McGregor himself would be envious. The footwork was so good in this fight. Or look for the moments where he pushes forward behind a jab and gets Ortega to react defensively and then works his way around him to a position where he is facing Ortega, ready to fire off that straight right, or Ortega is no longer facing him. There's tons and tons of those moments in this fight. So, like, I think you were 100% spot on pointing out that the lateral movement of Max would be, like, the defining tactical advantage for him. Because, yeah, he just made hay with it. There was other stuff, too, though. Like, Max's crazy rhythm changes. The way that he will just, like... I want to say this. I don't know if this will make sense, but... I don't know of anyone in MMA who throws punches more like a boxer than Max Holloway. Where he is literally, a lot of time, just throwing the punches. Like, in the way that you would throw a baseball. Just, like, slinging them out there. And so, like, sometimes you're just playing catch. Still the same motion. You can still get a lot of speed, and if that ball hits someone in the head, it's still going to hurt them. But you're just playing catch. You're not trying to throw that hard. Or you can throw a fastball. All of them come from the same motion for Max Holloway. All of them are very relaxed and very practiced. And so, like, he has this ability to mix up the power and the speed, to use his punches that you think are about to hurt you, to measure you, to set you up for the one that's really going to hurt you next. Just, it's such intelligent volume that you just have to, he's constantly giving you things you're feeling and you have to react to, but there are no discernible patterns when you're on the ends of those punches, because of how well he mixes up the speed, the target, everything. It's so tricky, man. His 1-2 is just incredible because it's not just a combination. It's like a dozen different combinations depending on how he wants to throw the jab and then how he wants to throw the right hand. Yep.
And a lot of it is, so, we talked about Ortega's style as being based off of, from a very MMA context, as being based off a lot of head manipulation. Mm-hmm. He head, the jab, the knee, the snap down, all this other kind of stuff. And a lot of Holloway's punches were that.
Yeah.
It was, he'd kind of just spatter that jab out there, or, the 1-2 just to, without much steam on it, just to move Ortega's head around, just to be like, he'd see, where are you defensively moving from each one of these shots? And then when he's thought, right, Ortega's reached a point where he's, this is basically the limit of his defenses. His head is now over here, and I will punch him as hard as I can.
He was hitting his head like a double end bag. Like, he knew exactly where it was going, and he was making it go there by the precise way he was touching it, or even just threatening it with his jab in his right hand.
And I think honestly, a lot of that that eventually became how Ortega started to have success, because he was like, okay, I thought I could have a boxing match with this guy. I've got a good jab. I can move people around. I've got, solid body work. I'm hyper durable. Maybe I could box with this guy. I think he quickly started to realize maybe not quickly, but he did start to realize that he couldn't.
Yeah.
And a lot of his solution was basically, if I'm getting shifted, he was getting shifted out of position, and then Holloway was just hitting him hard, and he was just saying, well, it was the Gaethje tactic. It was, once I've been hit hard, at least now I know that he's slightly off balance, and I know where he is.
Yep.
And so he was just swinging back with hard counters. And I think, one of the things was Max was just really enjoying hitting him really hard. And then Max just couldn't stop himself from taking those opportunities to just land big right hands on Ortega over and over again. And so Ortega started to come back with the left hook. Almost immediately after he was always taking the biggest shots, he would come back and try and get something bigger in there.
Yeah, it's actually something I said in the Jędrzejczyk piece that I put out last week. Was talking about, it was like all about distance management and how you gauge, measure, and understand distance, how your understanding changes based on what's happening in the fight. And one of the points is like, essentially, like the idea of catch jab, stuff like that, where you gauge and use the distance, it's as simple as, if you can touch me, I can touch you. And that definitely applies to getting hit in the fucking head. Like, if you get hit hard, and I think it did look like Ortega has more power than Max Holloway. He's a heavy hitter. He's got some serious weight in his punches, but like, it's still really tough against Holloway to have your strategy come down to, well, when he hits me, I'm going to hit him back. And especially because, I agree. Like, Max got carried away. He was having so much success. How can you not get carried away? Like, again, it was like hitting a double-end bag. How do you not just get into a flow and just keep going to work and enjoying yourself? But the thing is, like, Max did adapt. He came out in the fourth round. Not only was Ortega tired, but Max was ready. Like, the first 30 seconds of the fourth round are incredible to watch. He's ready for every single counter that comes back at him and just savagely punishes Ortega with these really quick touching punches for every single attempt. He moves his head. He's shifting stances, like sort of shifting from one side to the other. So he's never on the center line, and he can attack from all of these weird angles that Ortega just can't predict. He's hitting the body still. He just did a sensational job. There's one more thing I want to discuss before I move on from this. I think we touched on this really briefly last week, but I want to give a little shine to one of the less eye-catching aspects of this fight, which is Max Holloway's clinch game.
Yep.
It's really good. And like last week, I think we talked about, we didn't see his style of clinching leading to a lot of the front headlock opportunities that Ortega likes to take advantage of against other people. But he also, like, you want to celebrate Max Holloway's distance management. The way that he entered the clinch on his own terms so often, the way that he positioned himself and, like, looked for opportunities but never, ever hung around longer than it made sense to. He constantly went to, like, putting his palms on the insides of Ortega's biceps, framing off, creating space. When Ortega got lazy, he would crack him with an elbow or try to, and then he'd be off at an angle. So Ortega would have to readjust to follow him, and he was probably readjusting through a continued hail of combination punches.
Yeah, it's been a while since Holloway has fought a defined wrestler, but if you're a wrestler and you're looking at that fight, whether you're Nurmagomedov or Edgar or anyone, you just got to be, you're not going to be looking at that thinking, oh wow, yeah, this is going to be an easy time here.
Yeah.
Just his grip awareness, his awareness of where he was, the speed in which he would, just break himself away. Like, Ortega had almost no opportunities. But yeah, like, just going back to that fourth round, I thought it was great because it was just a classic, like, I'm not left-handed either. MMA moment. You know, that thing from The Princess Bride? Like,
Yeah.
Ortega finds that third gear. Well, he finds that next gear in the third round. He's like, which he so often does, is that he's been fighting well in the rounds up to that, and then he's like, you know what, I really want to win this. And then suddenly he's just looking much better. He's much more accurate. He's much more focused. He's willing to take shots, to give shots that he wasn't before. He's confident that he's got the read. There's a clear time when Ortega is just on point, and that's why he's become a meme like that. Third round Ortega. And then, you know, after that you can see like Holloway. It's like, yes, I also have a next gear. Would you like to see it?
Yeah, and it was also
just fucking buries him.
It was also sort of literally I'm not right-handed either, because a lot of the fourth round was in southpaw. So Ortega's like, shit.
Yeah, that was the other solution to Ortega just biting down and swinging when he got hit, right? Is that he became increasingly unsure of what he was throwing back at, whether he was throwing back at someone in open or closed stance, and like, was the power shot that hit me a left straight or a right straight? And I'm increasingly starting to not know, and then just starting to hit air, and then just getting hideously beaten.
Yeah, I mean, there was like this one moment where Max, like, he comes in off southpaw, he throws the left straight, Ortega swings, but he's like, he sort of sidesteps past him, and he does like that Dillashaw move where he doesn't really even move his feet. He just sort of turns which way he's facing on his feet. And suddenly now he's an orthodox, still beating Ortega up from the side, just in the different stance now. Like, how, yeah. The more that a guy like Ortega has to plant and swing, the more befuddling that kind of stuff becomes. Because there appear to be no angles from which Holloway cannot just continuously pour on punishment. Speaking of that, before we wrap up, thoughts on Brian Ortega here? Like, I think we'd probably like to see a long layoff. Thoughts on him going forward? Like, this is a potentially career-damaging, career-changing kind of fight. He absorbed a lot of punishment. And frankly, his corner should be embarrassed that they didn't think about stopping it until the doctor stopped it, to be honest.
Yeah. I also want to shout out that doctor for actually, because his eye was not 100% closed. And a lot of doctors would have just been like, well, he can pretty much see, set him out there.
Yeah.
And he was just like, man, no, the doctor stopped it, and that was great. He took, a career's worth of punishment in that round. And I mean, I don't know. I tend to think he'll be all right. He didn't get. You can never really tell. You never know when you're looking at a kind of Kane JDS type situation where I think they both just took enormous chunks out of each other. This was definitely a young man's fight on both ends. Not just. I mean, Holloway put on a masterclass, but also he did take some monstrous bombs and just walk through them. There will come a day where he just can't do that. You can't pull these kind of performances out, for many years. This was a young man's fight, spending their youth against each other. I tend to think we'll see good things from Ortega. I mean, he looked better again, I thought, than he has previously. But it was just that Max is he's just a wizard. And I thought that, his takedowns in particular looked greatly improved. And, he's just young and he's incredibly tough. And I think we'll see more from him. I think he's gonna be around for a while. I think there's a lot of tough matchups waiting for him. I don't think the UFC will match him softly. They don't do that shit. So yeah, I would like to see a layoff, but I think he stays around in the top 5 for quite some time.
Yeah, people were talking about Ortega versus Aldo, and I'm like, sounds like a fascinating fight. Please don't do that next. I don't know. Yeah, it's featherweight's not easy, but a courageous performance from Brian Ortega, no doubt. A sensationally skilled and confident performance for Max Holloway, who, like a lot of champions, seems to fight even better when he has a chip on his shoulder and feels he has something to prove. He looked incredible. And P.S. He's not the greatest featherweight of all time yet. All right, just relax. He's getting there. He's amazing. Just, settle down a little bit. Let the man build his resume a little longer. Let him stack up some more title defenses or whatever he wants to do. Let him beat Conor McGregor. If they do a rematch and he wins it, that might put him up there. Although that would probably be a lightweight. I hope they don't do it. Yeah, I hope they don't do it at flyweight, featherweight. Conor can't make that weight anymore. Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. I mean, always with these kind of things for fighters who are still fighting, where people like, is this person the GOAT? I think people tend to extrapolate into the future. I think from these kind of perspectives, you have to be like, what if this person literally never fought again, or went on a 5-fight loss streak, or something like that? What if this was the end of their career right now?
That's why it's easier for people to say that.
Would you put Holloway over Aldo? And from my perspective, no.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. Yeah, it's easy for people to say that Salvador Sanchez is the greatest featherweight boxer of all time because he died at 23. So you can imagine all of the incredible things he might have gone on to do. Whereas it's possible his chin would have failed him in his very next fight. He would have lost 5 in a row and you wouldn't be thinking about him in quite the same light. So, give Max Holloway a little time. Still an incredible career highlight kind of performance from both guys, honestly. Ortega's heart and toughness and his ability to come back and find ways into the fight, and then Max's ability to just, reveal that he's not in fact left-handed and squash all of those hopes and dreams in a savage 4th round. It was something to behold. And that's about all we have to say for it. I mean, there probably is a lot more to be said, to be honest, but we've got other things to discuss, namely a women's flyweight fight between...
You can make it, Connor.
We'll talk about it after this. Valentina Shevchenko versus Joanna Jacek. And then we're also going to get into Gunnar Nelson versus Alex Oliveira. Even having finally picked him correctly, Gunnar Nelson still did not do it the right way. He's too baffling, but you kind of got to love him. And then we're going to talk about Thiago Santos versus Jimmy Manuwa, because why the fuck not? It was insane. And it deserves to be talked about. All of that, and then UFC on Fox, Lee versus Iaquinta 2 after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. Hello, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are here to discuss. I'm not going to go through this whole bit again. Phil, you asked for a good solid 15 minutes of gloating. Your time starts now.
Oh man, was I so right on? No, I can't do it. No, the thing is, I've made too many shitty picks against Joanna in the past to be able to actually gloat about this. I can't actually necessarily say that this was a particularly good pick because I picked Jessica Andrade and Tisha fucking Torres to beat her. So
oh, you picked Tisha. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I know that was fucking retarded.
Disgusting. Anyway,
so yeah. So I can't gloat.
You can, please feel free if the need takes you, then don't hesitate. I kind of deserve it.
I mean, what this is interesting is it goes back to our weight cutting discussion because I think both of us have sort of pushed back against the narrative that bigger is necessarily better, and specifically when it comes to things like striking and we tend to favor the idea of, the Whittaker going up and taking out the bigger guys, or perhaps in one of these cases, the Santos. But there was an interesting stat I saw after we'd recorded last week's Heavy Hands that I would have brought up. And that was that I believe in the strawweight division, they've had a bunch of matchups where where former strawweights have fought bantamweights. I mean, in the women's flyweight division,
yes,
there have been a bunch of matchups where
women who moved up have fought women who moved down.
Yeah. And do you know what? I think, and someone correct me, catch us on Twitter or something and correct me if I'm wrong here. I think the record between those has been, to this point, it is, I think, after last night's event, it is 8-1-1 for the bantamweights.
Wow. Imagine that, by the way, because strawweight is clearly such a better division than bantamweight. It's so much better. Bantamweight is women's light heavyweight. It's trash. But yeah, I mean, do you have to take into account the style matchups of those fights? Like, was it a lot of, because this is part of our weight cutting discussion, right? Was it a lot of grapplers beating the smaller women, or what? Probably wasn't quite.
I mean, you'd have to go back and look at them one by one, right? I mean, the one win, I think, is Caitlin Chukagian over Alexis Davis, and it was a split.
Yeah, I thought Alexis Davis won that fight.
Right. And so this card we had Jessica Ai then taking back the strawweight's one win. The strawweight's one win, and then we had Jędrzejczyk against Shevchenko. And
there's no denying that Jessica Ai's flyweight run has benefited from the fact that she has just looked like a physical beast compared to her opponents.
Yeah. If you remember some of her previous performances, she was just getting kind of thrown around.
Yeah, and she would put a lot of that energy and stuff into the tie-ups and the wrestling and all that, but she would exhaust herself, or it would have no effect. Whereas, now she has been throwing people around and overpowering them. Yeah,
I mean, and we've got to think, how big the difference between these divisions is. This is not just, 10 pounds between weight classes, and nor is it even more than that up at bigger weight classes. The proportion of weight is coming close to 10% each time we jump between these classes. I mean, this is not exactly like saying, how would Demetrius Johnson do against Jose Aldo 2 weight classes up? But it is also a dynamic that we got to think about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the sheer physical disparity ended up being like a big story of this fight.
Yeah.
I mean, Joanna's takedown defense is still incredible, but it sort of didn't matter because Shevchenko was just able to kind of hulk her in the same way that she did back in their early terrible Muay Thai fights.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the thing is like we talked about this last week. You were talking about the idea of style matchups not really changing that much. And to my mind, I think of that. I mean, I think a lot of times, our old friend, Dr. Pat Wyman, could attest to this, since he literally loves nothing more than juiced up athletic freaks. And, but for me, I tend to overlook those aspects a lot, which is why my favorite fighters are such bad athletes so frequently. But, I like to focus more on the sort of game that they play, their personalities, how that comes through in their fighting, and their level of technique, things like that. Not that either of these things is more important than the other, because sometimes being a great athlete, it's just cheating, and you can just do things other people can't, and get away with technical errors and all that. So the thing is thinking of that statement about, oh, well, Valentina beat her 3 times in Muay Thai. Does the style matchup really change? I'm like, well, it has to, because Joanna has added so much to her wrestling game, has added so much to her outside boxing game, has added so much to her ability to adapt and sort of build layers as the fight goes on. And Valentina is still just like a counterpuncher whose game is maybe a little less well suited to MMA. So the style matchup has to have changed. What I did not account for is that a fundamental aspect of this style matchup is that Valentina Shevchenko probably always has been much stronger than Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Like, that apparently was a part of how she was able to fling her around in their Muay Thai bouts. And despite all the wrestling skill Joanna has added, she was still able to do it here. I mean, Joanna did have some moments as the fight went on where her technique came in handy, and she was able to read the takedowns that had previously worked against her coming and escape from them. And her scrambling was fairly handy. Like, other women in this division, I imagine, would have spent more time after being taken down, with Valentina on top of them very, very slowly and very, very methodically trying to beat them up. But, like, she just got flung around. Like, in comparison, Like, I keep saying she looked like Yoel Romero. Like, she looked like such a powerful athlete in comparison to Joanna. I never would have expected that much of a physical disparity. Every shot landed harder. She looked faster and more explosive. But when they tied up, she was just wrenching her around with ease. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we can't just say that it was a physical disparity. She obviously had some major stylistic edges as well. I mean,
yeah.
So one of the things is that I think Joanna, for all her skill, does really, really like being at a reach advantage, or at the very least parity. And you could kind of see why, especially in the early going of this fight, because it took her a very, very long time to really land anything on Shevchenko. And in some ways, her margins had clearly been made a lot smaller by both the physical and the kind of strength and explosiveness and the size parity, and also just by Shevchenko's comfort in striking. Is that so? Joanna would throw out all these kind of probing jabs at the first round. She was basically just kind of slightly doing the Holly Holm thing of just punching air. She was just pouring jabs out to get a reaction from Shevchenko to try and pull something out of her, and Shevchenko just watched her, because Shevchenko was just like, it was like the old, it was like a bit like the Floyd Connor thing, when you just see him like smile and take a punch at absolute maximum extension. I like that. Obviously not nearly as exaggerated or skillful, but she was just like, no, I can't get hit by these.
Yeah, I know that's a feint. I know that's not a threat. Yeah, she just...
Yeah. And so in those situations, she knew it turned it around. She knew that Joanna's jabs didn't become something for her to gain information off Shevchenko with. They became something that Shevchenko was gaining information from her with.
Yeah.
Shevchenko was just standing there, and Joanna had nothing to time apart from when she was getting hit.
Yeah. It's like you put the huge impetus on your opponent to be the pressure fighter before they're ready to even start pressuring. Like, you have to find a way in. I'm sitting here. My shots are clearly hurting more than yours. And yeah, I don't want to imply it was just a physical. I mean, the physical difference was striking. It was not in the sense that it was kickboxing, but that it really caught my eye. And I think it did of a lot of other people as well. They're just like, holy shit, she's just throwing her around and clearly landing harder and everything. But also like you have to give credit to Shevchenko's oftentimes insanely frustrating style, in that, like, given an aggressive opponent who throws lots of volume like Jędrzejczyk, she got a chance to shine. Like, she showed off that she's got enough variety to her counters. She can mix them up if you keep forcing her to throw them. She throws them like she has a hair trigger. She is always ready, waiting for that one moment when you actually commit and she's in position to crack you back. And when you do that a lot, like, on the one hand, she made Joanna fight that way. On the other hand, that's just sort of the way that Joanna ends up fighting anyway. Like Max Holloway, she tries to drown her opponent with stamina and drown them in volume.
Yeah, I mean, but I also honestly feel like Shevchenko did, because, Shevchenko, it wasn't just a power punching style due to being at that weight class. She was a power puncher. She had that exact style at 135, and that was the interesting thing to me, that she didn't really. I was interested to see if she had a more aggressive style. It really did look very, very similar to what we've seen before.
Yeah.
But she really did manage to scare Joanna off a lot. Like, they really wanted, you could hear the ATT team pleading with her just to, throw the right. But she was clearly worried about what was coming back at her. She couldn't find that range where she could start to drown Shevchenko. She got back into it when she started basically playing off that snap kick to the body. It would seem to be similar to, in a very similar way to the Nunez fight. It's just a shot that, for whatever reason, Shevchenko clearly just hasn't encountered much and just can't counter in the same way that she can counter. Did we mention that she's a tremendous kick counterer?
Yes.
I think we did.
I don't know if we did, but she is.
Yeah. But apart from that kick, same as the Nunez fight, she's just blind to it. and Joanna was able to pull herself back into the fight, and then you started to see like shades of the Joanna of old.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, Shevchenko was still just able to find. She's still able to like just burst forward with flurries of punches, and if she landed one, it was it was enough to take a significant chunk of momentum away from Joanna. So yeah, it was a very impressive performance.
Yeah, I agree, man. I'm outraged. I feel betrayed. I will never get over this. But also, like, full credit to Valentina Shevchenko. She looked awesome. She looked great. And the only caveat I will add is that because she did look like classic model Valentina Shevchenko, the only saving grace of her being the queen of this division is that everyone else in it kind of sucks. So she probably will get to trash people. But I'm not expecting exciting performances going forward, people. I'm sorry. I'm still going to get mad at her sometimes, all right? She's like, I don't know. You got to be able to charm me like Tyron Woodley does to be able to play this kind of game without me getting mad at you. Or you know what? If Dana White hated Valentina Shevchenko more, I would have more reason to root for her. I think that's really what it is.
Yeah,
if she was more
also,
a thorn in the side of the brass, then I would appreciate her frustrating style a lot more.
Also, it's the fact that unlike Woodley, I suspect, and we'll get to see this more at strawweight because I'm not sure how true this is, but I suspect she may be one of the people who hits just hard enough to really scare people off, whilst not hitting hard enough to actually knock them out.
Yeah, or perhaps hits hard enough to just doesn't actually like put it on well enough to actually knock them out. Perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, a great performance. Looked physically fantastic. Technically looked super sharp, and yeah, like. I'm not trying to backdoor compliment Joanna when I say that she brought the best out of Shevchenko, because given an opponent who will constantly present opportunities, Shevchenko showed how well she can capitalize on almost all of them. She looked really, really sharp. All right, so let's move on. We'll try to quickly get through some of the other bouts from this card. Mostly looking at the main card here, but first we have to talk about Gunnar Nelson and Cowboy Oliveira. A fight that was going very, very badly for Gunnar Nelson, the guy we said we expected to basically win in the first round or the second round if he'd controlled the first round. He got obliterated, perhaps 10-8'd in the first round. He really took some huge shots. And then he cut Cowboy Oliveira's brain out of his skull and started chewing on it. And then Oliveira died. It was a horribly violent ending to this fight.
Right. I really like that we've got Gunnar Nelson and Damian Maia, who are just two of the most chilled, relaxed. MMA is just a sport and a way of, and I want to just beat my opponents in the cleanest, most efficient, painless way possible. And like, Damian Maia juiced someone's head, and like, Gunnar Nelson just somehow ripped every blood vessel in his scalp open and then just reached his hand through this waterfall of blood to choke him unconscious as he's screaming in agony and already looking for a way out.
Both of these very, like, even-tempered, calm men now have unforgettable highlights of them squeezing the lifeblood out of another man's skull.
Yeah, like you got to feel like when they've, in later years, they're going to be training in jiu-jitsu seminars or whatever, and people are going to be like, oh yeah, didn't you know, like, Gunnar Nelson, he was a ranked welterweight back in the day. And they're going to be like, oh yeah, I love Gunnar. I'm going to look up some of his fights. What the fuck?
Like, truly, the replay, that one angle where he's on the back and there's just a fountain of blood. Oh, it was disgusting. It was disgusting.
Yeah, it's just literal, like, just a waterfall of blood. Just these drapes of it that he just puts his hand through. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. Like, it did make me feel like Alex Oliveira, he's really welterweight Derek Lewis.
Yeah.
He's comparably skilled for the division, which means that he's like 20 times more skilled than Derek Lewis is.
Yes.
But he's also, comparatively at the same level compared to other people. In that, he won that first round because Gunnar Nelson got him in a body triangle, and then the Cowboy was just like, I'm going to turn round now. And then
Gunnar
I will have top position. It's like, if that was possible, other people would do it.
Yeah, even Gunnar in the post-fight interview, he was like, I did not expect that. It was a surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just like, it's exactly the same thing of just like, why do I have to learn this technique stuff? That seems like it's something for people who are constrained by physical limits.
Yeah, but then,
obviously in the second round, he was just like, yeah, that top position stuff was fun and cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to waste all my energy going for takedowns against the cage, and then the minute Nelson takes me down, I'm just going to get put into mount, and again, I'm now completely out of energy. So, yeah, he's not very good, but he is tremendously physically overwhelming, and unlike a lot of other physically overwhelming fighters, he is constantly trying to leverage his physical advantages.
Yeah, like a lot of great athletes, he often appears to be accidentally actually good. Where it's like, man, no one else would get away with some of this shit. This complete lack of process. You have no idea how to direct a fight in the way you want it to go. You just everything is forced. Everything is forced from Cowboy Oliveira. But
yeah, he's also he's just a fucking savage. Just a hot. You can see why there's a kind of there's a kind of Venn diagram, or there's a lineage connecting Derek Lewis to him to he's a Brazilian guy to Figueiredo and also Romero. These guys where there's all because he reminds me of those guys as well in the things like the constant fouling and the kind of, wow, this is just a great time, and he's just, I'm never sure how I feel about him.
Just delighted to be causing pain and
tremendously compelling to watch, and also someone who I'm generally kind of glad to see lose.
Yeah. Well, speaking of savage violence, should we go ahead and drop that? Let me place a little marker here. Should we go ahead and drop in the translation of what Thiago Santos was saying in his post-fight interview after defeating Jimmy Manuwa? Because I believe the phrase was...
tava maravilhoso, tava gostoso. Eu já falei que eu gosto de fazer isso aqui em cima. É tocar porrada, é tocar soco. É fazer meus adversários sentir dor até eles não aguentarem mais.
It was fun. It was marvelous. I want to make my opponents feel pain until they can't bear it anymore.
And he said these words with the most pleasant smile on his face. And then immediately followed up by, saying, I love you, Mom. I love my kids or whatever. And thank you, Brazil, for supporting me. Very perfectly pleasant, except for the part where he said that, he wants to drink his opponent's pain like wine. He just wants to savor every drop of their suffering. Thiago Santos is the savior of the light heavyweight division, Phil. He is what we deserve. He is going to run through these ranks and defeat everyone by doing nothing but being a middleweight athlete who just smashes things, smashes whatever you put in front of him. It's incredible. I have loved this run at 205 so far, and I don't want it to ever end.
Thiago Santos is the goddamn greatest. I hope Pat got to see this main card, and I hope he loved this fight, because this was... I know Pat would have loved this fight.
Yes.
This was just bricked up athletic dudes. I mean, who didn't love this fight? This was just bricked up athletic dudes hitting each other as hard as they feasibly could for as long as it lasted, which was 6 minutes.
Yep. Yeah, and it was also it was pretty incredible. This is one of the things about Thiago Santos as a light heavyweight is that his conditioning seems insanely good. Where he fights that way, he threw so much power and took so many huge shots in return in the first round. Was almost knocked out at 2 points. Was really out on his feet running for his life basically. And then the second round started and Manuwa was still tired. And Thiago just kind of looked how he did at the start of the first round again, which is terrifying. Like, you're not supposed to be able to do that. It's cheating. Again, athleticism is cheating, okay? Ban athletes from MMA if you want to see a fair sport. That's my call.
I will back you up on this one, Connor. Although I suspect that then the athletes might then make their own sport and everyone would go and watch that one, whilst it would just be us watching Elias Theodorou against
No.
Trevor Smith 2.
No. I refuse. I won't do it.
I mean, yeah, this was the greatest. I need to see Thiago Santos like knock out John Jones at some point. I just need him to prove how trash this division is, and more than that, like, it's the fact that he's just even nuttier at this division than he was as a middleweight. Yeah. Like, you can just see him go, like, what's going to be my big defensive innovation for this, my first true test against a real light heavyweight? And it's like, I'm going to spin like a fucking top whenever I'm in trouble and then just stick a random limb out. Like,
oh my God.
It was glorious. Like, at one point he got in trouble and he like did a weird kind of ballerina spinning kick. I'm not even sure what it was.
He did like a rolling thunder hurricane kick something. Yeah.
Yeah, he tried to like, yeah, at one point he did like a back fist into a tornado kick into a jab. Like, what are you doing, Thiago Santos? And can you do it more?
Yes.
And he's one of the only fighters to have ever fought like 5 times in a calendar year. And he's clearly just getting more insane every time. And I love it.
I like imagining most fighters were like, oh, there's stylistic development. Thiago Santos is just succumbing to madness at light heavyweight. And it's incredible. Oh my God. Yeah. So there's not really anything technically to break down about this fight. It was insane. Jim Manuwa did all that he could to survive and then work his way back into it. A really credible effort. But Thiago Santos is just a shit-eating wild man. And that's all there is to it. He's going to throw everything super duper hard with relatively little thought for technique. His fundamentals have improved bit by bit over the years, but frankly, he's just a maniac and light heavyweight sucks. And so he's here to save us from the scourge. Okay. All right. That's it for UFC 231, I think. There were some other good, memorable fights on this card. Diego Lima with a shocking KO on the prelims. Alexander Rakic, whom all of you listeners prevented us from discussing last week, got a really impressive win over, Devin Clark, who people were thinking was, like, Rakic was one of the biggest favorites in this card. But, hey, man, you face a big-ass, a big, powerful athlete with light heavyweight power. And, don't count those kind of guys out. So Clark had some good moments in that fight. But that's about it as far as the most interesting stuff. So let's take a break. When we come back, UFC on Fox, whatever it is, the last one, Kevin Lee versus Al Iaquinta 2, Edson Barboza versus, who's he fighting?
Dan Hooker.
Oh yeah, Dan Hooker. And more after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways. As it turned out, that third segment would come even later than expected. Hey folks, Connor here. A little update. Looks like this episode is going to be a little truncated. Editing this one together, segment 3's track ended up being totally corrupted to the point where I just cannot play it. And so what we're going to do instead is hopefully get you guys a little bit of a bonus preview this week for UFC on Fox. Again, the fights we discussed, Kevin Lee versus Al Iaquinta, Dan Hooker versus Edson Barboza, and Sergio Pettis versus Rob Font. All interesting for their own reasons. So keep your eyes peeled to the Heavy Hands Patreon for a little bonus episode on that. And I'm sorry, that's just the best way I could think of to make up for this without having to delay this week's episode. So in the interest of getting you guys our recap of UFC 231 as quickly as possible, It is what it is. And let me do the plug since Phil's not here. You should, of course, check out the weekly, or at least evently preview that he does with David Castillo for Bloody Elbow, the toe-to-toe preview. I'm sure he'll be doing one for Lee versus I Quinta and possibly some other fights of that card as well. Those are always very funny and very insightful, and both guys have interesting voices. They're some of the best previews out there, and they're a lot of fun to read. As for me, a couple of pieces on Holloway versus Ortega this week, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And otherwise, again, check out the Heavy Hands Patreon, and thank you so much for your support. My sincerest apologies for this. I don't know what happened to that audio, but in the words of the featherweight champ, it is what it is, I guess. So, and hey, at least we got you out of here in under an hour. And to make up for it, stick around after the outro plays out to hear us cracking up about how insane Thiago Santos is. Thank you again for listening, everybody. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, I think you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands. Alright. Give me just a second. I'm taping up my finger. I have a horrible...
Oh, wait a minute.
Huh. Yes?
So there's just been they've just released an article on Thiago Santos where he's like, that was not the plan. I was supposed to capitalize on his mistakes and my footwork. But I stopped to think a little in the locker room, and I realized how Jimmy walks forward too much when the fight has a nice pace. He's a sniper. He's really good with his hands, and he corners you and starts landing shots. So I told my Tata, I said we couldn't fight at a steady pace. I wanted to step on the gas right from the start, go full speed. He told me to do what I felt well worth doing, so I wouldn't leave the octagon with doubts. I had that in my mind. I didn't want to watch him fight like I did against David Branch. He said he was with me no matter what I decided, and that's when I decided to brawl from the first minute, and it's what I did. I fucking love you, Thiago Santos.
He had an entire plan coming into the fight, and then in the locker room was like, you know what?
Fuck this guy up. Spin.
Because the idea that he had some kind of plan at all, looking at how this fight started. It started so insanely. He didn't hesitate at all to just start beating the shit out of Jimmy Manuwa. Oh, man.
They should do this every time.
Yeah.
This is clearly his optimal way of fighting. They should just be like, they should have some incredibly, just some incredibly elegant, refined training process where they make him just never get hit over the course of an entire training camp, and then just 5 minutes before the fight, just go just fuck him up, Thiago, just bum rush him, bicycle kick knees and tornado kicks from the opening bell, and he can just go absolutely nuts.
His entire camp is just based around avoiding the damage that he's obviously going to absorb in the fight. And just making him mad 5 minutes before it starts.
Today, Thiago, we'll be practicing both. We'll be learning the elegant arts of fighting. We'll be refining your mind. There will be a session of fencing, followed by chess. We'll be developing one of the most effective and intellectual strategies known to man. And then you're just going to go fucking nuts.
So you think every time they should develop a game plan?
Yeah.
And then just throw it away. I think
develop increasingly more elaborate and elegant game plans. And then he will presumably go ever more insane.
Yeah, because I think there was a sort of joy of freedom in the way that he fought, where it was knowing that he was abandoning the game plan was a part of what made him so effective. It was the reckless abandon of just dropping all of his expectations about the fight and just going completely ham. So yeah, I think you're probably onto something here. Sounds like a good way to go. I'm still watching this fight. It's fucking ridiculous. Oh. Okay. Hold on. Let me grab some footage of something other than Thiago Santos. Let's see.
But why would you ever need to?
Yeah. Let me look at some Dan Hooker.